Hey everyone, welcome back to EpicPit, Reddit Stories. If you're new here, I'm really glad you joined us. This is the place where we take real stories, true experiences people have gone through, and tell them in a way that feels like sitting down with a friend who's letting you in on something wild that happened in their life. Some stories make you laugh, some make you think. Some make you angry, but the best ones, they leave you with that feeling of satisfaction. You know, that deep down sense that justice was finally served. And today's story is one of those. It's not about throwing punches in the hallway or some dramatic fight, breaking out in the cafeteria. No, it's smarter than that. It's about a bully who pushed a friend how his own words ended up destroying the one thing he cared about most. Trust me. By the end of this story, you'll see why I still think about it, even years later. So let's go back in time. To high school, I grew up in one of those small towns where life feels a little slower. We had one main street that ran through the middle, lined with a couple diners, a gas station, a library that barely anyone went to, and the kind of hardware store where the owner knew your dad, your uncle, and probably your grandfather too, in a place like that. Nothing stayed private. If you got in trouble, your parents probably knew about it before you even made it home. If you started dating someone, the entire school and half the town found out. By the next morning. We only had one elementary school, one middle school, and one high school. So basically, you grew up with the same kids from the time you were learning your ABCs to the moment you tossed that graduation cap in the air. And that's the thing about small town schools. You don't get to escape people. You don't get to reinvent yourself with a whole new crowd. If you had a bully in the second grade, guess what? You were probably stuck with them for another 10 years. For me, that person was Jake. Now, Jake wasn't what you'd call an intelligent bully. He wasn't the popular athlete or the tough guy everyone was afraid of. He was persistent. That's the word. He'd been annoying me for years. Always tossing little insults, making dumb comments, sometimes trying to embarrass me in front of people. He wasn't good at it, though. And honestly, that was my one advantage. See, Jake wasn't quick-witted. His insults were weak, the kind of stuff that sounded like they were borrowed from a bad sitcom. Most of the time, I could fire back with something sharper, quicker, and watch him stumble over his words, unable to think of a comeback. And let me tell you, when you're in high school and your bully can't answer back, that's gold. People laugh. You feel like you've won. And Jake? He hated it. Every time I got the better of him, you could see it. His jaw would clench, his ears would go red. He hated being the butt of the joke. And the more I embarrassed him, the more determined he became to get one over on me. It happened in 11th grade. The day started out normal enough. The halls were packed, lockers slammed, people rushed to class. You could hear the cafeteria ladies already banging trays around down the hall. It was just another day in small-town high school until Jake spotted me. He tossed out another mean comment, just the usual nonsense, nothing memorable. And I, being so used to it by now, shot back with a comeback. But this one landed perfectly. The timing, the delivery, everything about it hit. And the crowd, they lost it. A couple of people doubled over laughing. One guy clapped his hands like I'd just told the best joke of the week. The sound echoed down the hall, and Jake, he froze. His face turned bright red. His lips pressed into a thin line, and I could see it. He wanted to sink into the floor. For a moment, I thought that was it. Another round won. Another small victory in our never-ending back and forth. But then, Jake leaned in, so close I could feel his breath on my ear. And in this low, venomous voice, he whispered, "Someone ought to repay you." Asterisk, and then he pulled back, smirked, and walked away, like he had just scored some kind of twisted victory. At first, I didn't even move. The noise of the hallway blurred around me, lockers banging, sneakers squeaking on the floor, but in my head, everything was silent. Because what do you even do with that? That's not just an insult. That's not just a dig. That's a line so dark, so vile, it doesn't even belong in the same world as high school jokes. I remember feeling cold, like someone had poured ice water through my veins. And then, anger. Not just irritation, but real bone-deep anger. I went to my next class, but I couldn't focus. The words echoed in my head. I sat through the teacher's lecture, but all I heard was that sentence on a loop. At lunch, I stared at my food, my hands shaking. While Jake laughed with his friends across the cafeteria like nothing had happened, I wanted to scream. I wanted to march over and throw the tray in his face. But more than anything, I wanted him to understand, to feel the weight of what he'd said, because that wasn't just about me. That was about every person who's ever had to live with the fear of that word. By the final bell, I knew I couldn't just let it go. But what could I do? Tell a teacher? Maybe. But in our small town, teachers often avoided drama. They didn't want to be the bad guys, and half the time, things got brushed under the rug. Tell my parents. Sure, but by the time they heard, Jake would have found some way to spin it into a joke, like I was overreacting. Ignore it? Not a chance. If I ignored it, that grin of his would stick with me forever. And then, it hit me. Jake still lived at home. And in a small town, your mom knowing your business? That was worse than detention. Worse than suspension, I knew exactly where he lived. Everyone did. And as I left school, I turned my steps not toward home, but toward Jake's house. It felt like the longest walk of my life. My hands were sweaty, my stomach in knots. I rehearsed what I'd say over and over. What if she didn't believe me? What if Jake answered the door? But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't letting this slide. I knocked on the door. After a moment, it swung open. And there she was, Jake's mom. Now, let me tell you something. She was nothing like him. She had kind eyes, a warm smile. The kind of mom who asked how your day was going, even if she barely knew you. But when I told her why I was there, her whole face changed, the smile dropped. Her eyes widened, and she asked me to come in, sit down, and explain everything from the beginning. So I did. I told her about the years of little insults, the picking, the constant annoyance. And then finally, the words he whispered in the hallway. By the time I finished, her expression was a mix of shock, anger, and deep disappointment. And then, the front door opened. Jake walked in. At first, he looked confused. Saw me sitting there on the couch. But then, he saw his mom's face. And it clicked. She called him over, her voice steady, but sharp. He sat down across from her, glancing nervously between us. And then she asked him, "Is it true? Did you say that?" Jake stammered, tried to deny it. But she wasn't buying it. She called him out on the spot, cutting through his excuses like she'd done it 100 times before. And then, she let him have it, not by yelling, not by screaming, but with this calm, stern voice that carried more weight than any shouting ever could. She laid it out for him. How vile his words were. How deeply disappointed she was. How serious this was? Jake sat there, shrinking, smaller and smaller, until he looked like a kid caught stealing cookies instead of a smug 11th grader, and then came the punishment. First, his privileges gone. No phone, no TV, no video games. Then, his license, he had just gotten it a couple weeks earlier. And right there in front of me, she made him hand it over. But the best part? The essay she told him he was going to write an essay about what he had done. About why it was wrong, what the consequences were, and what he had learned. And he would keep rewriting it until she was satisfied. No excuses. No shortcuts. Jake's face was priceless. He looked like someone had just told him summer vacation was canceled for life. And then, with one last stern look, she sent him to his room. Afterward, his mom turned to me. She apologized. Over and over. She said she couldn't believe her son had said something like that. And then, she offered me a ride home. The car was quiet. She apologized again, told me she was going to make sure he learned his lesson. I believed her. There was something in her voice, this mix of sadness and determination. It told me she meant every word. When she dropped me off, I thanked her. walked inside, and for the first time all day, I felt lighter. The next day at school, Jake didn't even look at me. He didn't speak to me, didn't insult me, didn't even glance in my direction. And that lasted. For the rest of high school, he acted like I didn't exist. And honestly, that was fine by me, but sometimes I think back and wonder what those essays looked like. Did he scribble something half-hearted, only to have his mom tear it apart? Did he sit there night after night rewriting until he finally understood? I'll never know. What I do know is this: he didn't get his license back for 6 months. 6 months of walking, begging for rides, and thinking about how one disgusting comment cost him everything. Looking back, I don't think I could have planned a better revenge if I tried. I didn't throw a punch. I didn't yell. I didn't get the school involved. I just went to the one person he couldn't escape, his mom, and that was enough. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It isn't violent. It's letting the truth do the work. And in this case, the truth hit harder than anything else ever could.